everyone, hope you're doing all right. Thank you for joining me. It's time to start a new project, of course. You'll know that I've finished my Night Goblins and I said, right, I'm going to start work on some of these projects that I've had in boxes for a while. I've got lots of things that I want to do. So, of course, the first thing that I've done is decided to start something entirely different and entirely new, which involves acquiring some entirely new figures. Of course, that's the way it goes, isn't it? So this project started off a little while ago. Some of you will have seen on my blog the first time round and on the Old Hammer forum this display, but not this, because I actually haven't taken photos of this, so I should get around to taking some photos of this display and the things that are in it now that I've got better camera, better lighting setup and so forth. But this was my Goblinoids combat cards project, and it took me, well, so I started this in 2009, 2010, something like that, and it took me about 3 years to acquire all of the figures that are in all of the combat cards, and then they sat in boxes for another 3 years until I summoned up the courage to start painting and doing the converting on them, because firstly I wanted my painting to be better than it was, so I was doing some practice, but secondly there's a couple of these figures that are quite extensive conversions, and so I was intimidated by trying to have a go at those, so it took me a little while to sum up the courage, but I was quite happy with what I got out of there, and that's all on my blog if you want to chart. You can dig back to that process. That's all recorded there, and then I took them to boil a couple of years running, and we there was a combat cards game. In fact, there were 2 combat cards games published in White Dwarf. One called Attack, which I did a version of and took up to boil just as a little sort of side game to run with people, and that was entertaining. Yeah, so I had them up at Boyle a couple of years ago, and then last year at Boyle, Foundry released another pack of ex-Citadel figures, which I remembered being in another one of the combat cards decks. So that got me thinking, oh, maybe I should do another one of these decks, and so that I've got something to face these guys off against, so I can play attack with orcs against something else rather than just orcs versus orcs. It's actually not that easy. There are a few issues with doing that now. When I was doing these, some of the models were hard to find, but I was picking them up for £3, £4 a model, apart from some of the rarer ones, or that when I got near the end of the collection I was spending a bit more, but I was looking for ones that I could afford, being on a part-time minimum wage at that point. I wasn't spending a fortune on them. And it was doable, and nowadays prices have gone stupid. It's really hard to get a lot of these figures for the prices that I got them for. So I was thinking, okay, what could I do with them? And then there's the issue of how much I like the combat cards. So when I was a kid, I had 3 sets. I had the Goblinoid set, was the first one that I got, and it's still the set that I think the painting is the best on. It's still the set that I love the most, which is why I wanted to do this one. I also had the Chaos one, and I had the Space War one. And the Chaos one, I've got some of those figures. I've painted some of those figures slightly differently for other things, but it doesn't really inspire me to collect that set. And the Space War set is great. I like it, but it feels quite different to the Goblinoids set. I'd rather have another fantasy set that I'm putting against the Goblinoids here. And the Chaos set has some Rogue Trader models in it as well, so that's not entirely fantasy. And I wanted to keep it entirely fantasy. There's the Monsters set, but obviously that's big creatures. They're really disproportionate stat-wise. You can't really play them up against the other decks because they're just a lot better because they're big dragons and ogres and things. Then there's the Dwarfs set, which also has some rare unreleased figures in it, one of which I've done a tribute sculpt to previously anyway, so I have kind of got that one. But it's just, even even the common dwarves in that set, people want a lot of money for them now, so that's quite hard. And so that kind of leaves me with the Warriors set, and they're actually quite a good match up against the Goblinoids. And I like some of the. I like the painting in here. I don't think it's quite as good as the painting of the Orcs, but there are some figures that I'd have a go at, and I've actually got quite a few of these guys to start off with. But what made me think that that would be a really good set to start collecting is that a lot of those models are still available from Foundry. So they released a pack last year that I thought had a couple of the figures from this deck in it. So I went through this deck, and actually it didn't. They weren't quite the right ones, but Foundry do a lot of the right ones that are in here. So of this deck, I reckon about a third of these figures are still available from Foundry. The more historical ones, obviously, because Foundry, when Brian stopped being in the management of Foundry, when he stepped Citadel, when he stepped aside, part of the agreement was that the historical figures of that era, or pseudo-historical at least, would go with him and then be released by Foundry. So Games Workshop lost a lot of the historical Citadels, the Bretonnians, the current Empire, which is why a lot of that ended up being redone very soon after with a less historically influenced, or at least less directly historically influenced feel to it. So a lot of the kind of figures that are more feudal and medieval, and some of the barbarians in here are still available from Foundry. The difficulty is that they are available in packs, and usually you've got one or two of the Warriors card miniatures in a pack with 6 or 7 models that aren't. So you have to buy quite a lot of big packs, whereas the figures are not hugely expensive, £2 or £3 a piece, so equivalent to these, and they're nice castings. You're buying an awful lot of figures that you don't need. So I'm gonna do this deck, and I'm gonna then have words with Marcus and say, look, you sell most of these figures. It would be possible for you to put together this deck, and I don't know if people would be interested in buying this deck as a pack from Foundry. I don't know how popular or how many people remember the Warriors cards, but that's an option. That would be an option. It might involve putting some things in different molds, maybe, so that you're not wasting a lot of time spinning figures that you don't need. But it might be possible to put them together as packs. There are, of course, some figures that are not in here, notably the first one, the Gladius figure from the Heroic Fighters of the Known World. Some of these figures would not be able to. I think there are other figures in here that probably Foundry have and would legitimately have the rights to, because they are more historical flavoured, although some of the knights are a bit sort of fantasy, but I think you could maybe get away with it. But there are some definite fantasy figures in here that I think Foundry would not be able to get away with re-releasing, even if they had the masters for them. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to do the whole deck, but it might be possible to sub in some fresh sculpts or something to make up those difference. Now, there are a couple in here that are not even available as Citadel figures. So there are Wolf Brightaxe here. He is, I believe, an unreleased Marauder figure. Now, I have actually seen one of these go on eBay. It obviously went for a crazy amount of money because he's uncatalogued, unreleased, rare, unseen. Yeah, I've only ever seen the one, so I'm going to have to work on him. And I think he is close enough to another figure in the range that I can just do a conversion job. So that's my plan for him. This guy, Umberto Calavani, is one of those figures that you won't see. That will never, I would imagine, pop up, because I think it's a scratch build. It's possibly a Perry scratch build. Looking at the features there, I'd suggest that maybe it's a Perry scratch build. It was never produced. It's not in any of the catalogues. Never seen anything like it anywhere. It's not a conversion of another existing figure. So what I've had to do is sculpt one. So this guy, I'm quite happy with how he's come out. Yeah, it's just a complete sort of reproduction sculpt that I've done. So I am going to put him in a mould. So I've got a metal one because I want to play with these guys versus the orcs, and I want people handling them, and I'd feel better if he's a metal figure rather than actually handling the painted green, which would be a lot more brittle. Not that it's green. This is Procreate, okay? This is Procreate putty, so that's why it's great. But I spent most of yesterday doing him. I'm quite happy with him as a figure in a day. He's a little bit broad across the shoulders, maybe more than he should be, but I think captures the look quite nicely. And there may be an opportunity for you to get your hands on this guy. So you know, stay tuned with this project. I'll give you some updates, but it may be possible that I can help you out getting one of those for your Citadel Combat Cards Warriors set. The other one that's going to need a little bit of work is this guy, Luigi Gambaldi. Now, he's a conversion of an Old Man at Arms figure. Foundry sell this figure. It's not this figure. He's got a spear. He's not carrying a crossbow in this other hand. This is a conversion, but I'll get the Foundry figure, I think, rather than trying to track down a Citadel one for this, because I feel better cutting up an in-production Foundry one than a pre-existing Citadel. But if you've got a broken one that you're happy for me to play with, then maybe I will take that off your hands and do that with. But I'll pick up, I think I want the rest of the figures in that pack anyway, so I'll pick up the Foundry one and do a conversion of him. And it may be that if Foundry like the idea of doing a combat card set, once I've done the conversion, I could give it back to Foundry and they can put it in a mould and they can make him available alongside the set. You never know. A lot of these figures are crossovers with the Heroes for Dungeon Quest set. And so originally I was just going to pull them out of my Heroes for Dungeon Quest and paint them so that I could use them for both simultaneously, as Heroes for Dungeon Quest is on my list to paint anyway. But actually what I've ended up being able to do, because I posted on the Old Hammer forum and a few Facebook groups, and people were really helpful. They really got behind the idea of the project, and they've sent me stuff for free or given me stuff for good, like 10 years ago prices. So yeah, I have been able to accumulate some duplicates of those, so I'm going to paint them up, one set for this and one set for Heroes for Dungeon Quest, which means I can mount them separately and paint them up slightly differently if they have got slightly different colour schemes across the two. And I think I'm there with most of them. There are a couple that I'm finding hard to find. If I can find... Oh, they're not in here. I've got them separately. The ones that I'm finding hard to find. The real one that I'm struggling to find at the moment, there are two of them. One is Kumrak the Savage, this barbarian with the kind of yak fur and antlers, or horns at least. I'm finding him hard to find. And Helmut of Vertbad, this simple mercenary axeman here, is eluding me. There are, I think, 4 variants of this model with different heads, different headwear, different axe, and I can get one of those and I can convert it if I need to. But this guy, he's got a chainmail skirt which the others don't have, so that's a bit difficult to carve out a skirt that exists. It's not like the others have just a cloth, they've all got something sort of more elaborate there. So they were on this, I think, was the base model, and then they were converted on top of it. So it's hard to scrape all that away and put the chainmail in place. And the hat is different as well. So I'd rather try and get hold of this guy if I can. He's not called Helmut of Vertbad. I'll put up a picture of him. He doesn't appear in the red catalogue. He only appears in one of the White Dwarf pictures, and it's quite a small blurry picture of him, but you know, clearly he's out there somewhere. If you know of one, yeah, let me know. I would be interested to find one. So there's my plan. I'm hoping that I will be able to get this done in time for Bring Out Your Lead next year, so that I can have another, maybe try out the other combat cards game that was in White Dwarf, Orcs versus Warriors. But if it's not done for next year, it's not done for next year. But that's my next thing that I'm working on now. Apart from obviously the big terrain, the Maison terrain board, and the stuff that I need to do for Oakbound next year, and all of the other bits. You know, there's still plenty to do, but this is the thing that's currently capturing my imagination. Hence, sitting down for a whole day yesterday when I should have really been doing other things and sculpting this dude so that he's ready to go. So yeah, stay tuned. I shall put progress up on the blog, and I'm sure I shall shoot another couple of videos on here on it as things go forwards. If you're doing anything like this, I know there are a few people who are doing combat card sets. That's another reason I haven't done the Monsters one, the Chaos one. I don't know if anyone's doing the Dwarfs one. I know someone's doing the Space War one. There are people working on these projects, but they are certainly those decks are things that it takes a long time to acquire the models for, and there's conversion work in all of them. So they're long projects. But if you, I think they're great. I think they're a great focus for a project. They make a nice display. They give you an opportunity to work on your sculpting skills and your painting skills to try and match that sort of RKO painting style. So I really like it, and I'm quite excited about doing this Warriors set. I was really done when I finished the Goblinoids one. I was like, that's it. I've scratched that itch and done. But I am getting more excited than I thought I would be about doing the Warriors one. And as I say, it's pretty accessible. So if you're interested, contact Foundry, find those figures. I can put a list down below of where you can find all of the stuff that Foundry currently do. Yeah, and it'd be nice to see your take on those as well. So I shall get on with that. Take care, and I'll see you next week.